what a GT car, what a continent muncher. Whoa, there we go. It will bite you, it will bite you. I just squeezed on the throttle coming out of that roundabout in second and it just snapped. Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped and welcome back to 5 Zeros Supercars. Now, I've got a bit of a soft spot for an Aston Martin, especially one with a V12 engine in it. In fact, the first time I came here was to drive my mate David's GT12, still one of the best sounding cars I've ever driven. Well, today I'm here to drive this, the latest Vantage V12, a beautifully specced car with some insane options. And the big question is, will it sound as good as the GT12? Now, the story of the Vantage V12 dates back to 2009. And the story goes that one of the engineers at Aston Martin basically looked at the V8 Vantage and went, I reckon I can get one of our V12s in there. And Aston Martin went, go on then, give it a go. And it was a bit of a skunk works special. It had a 510 horsepower, 6-litre naturally aspirated V12 shoehorned into a Vantage V8 body, and it was an amazing bit of kit, a very, very visceral car to drive, incredible soundtrack, quite scary because there's so much torque. They did a manual and an auto version, and you can always tell them by the carbon louvres in the bonnet. And I guess the evolution of that car culminated in 2015 with the Aston Martin GT12. They only made 100 of those, and David, my mate who owns this car, was lucky enough to have an Aston Martin GT12 in Verde Mantis, an actual Lamborghini colour that he got signed off by Andy Palmer himself. And that car is still, for me, to this day, one of the most guttural, absolutely encompassing everything I want to know about a car and everything I want to feel about a car in terms of soundtrack. It was just like thunder driving down the road, an incredible, incredible car. But that is 2015, before the days of things like OPF filters and all the emissions controls that we have that generally take the life out of the noise of a car. And sadly, this car will have a bit of that. So let's delve into some of the details of this latest iteration of V12 Vantage. And I think it would be rude not to start with the engine. When you open the bonnet of one of these, it is still an amazing feat of engineering how they squeezed such a massive engine into such a small footprint. It's still a V12. In the GT12 and the previous Vantage V12s, it was a 6-litre naturally aspirated engine. Now this is a 5.2-litre twin turbo. However, the numbers have gone up somewhat in terms of performance. And the headline figure is 690 bhp. Up from just over 500. That is ridiculous. And 550 pounds-feet of torque. That's enough to kickstart a dead planet. All of that is now coupled through an 8-speed ZF gearbox and rear-wheel drive, and that will chuck this car down the road at a rapid rate of knots. It will do 0 to 62 in just 3.5 seconds and onto a top speed of 200 miles an hour. Now, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near that today because we're on the public road, it's winter time and the roads are damp. But that is some proper performance numbers. Now, just 333 Vantage V12s were made and less than 100 of those are in the UK. Each of the lucky owners was invited to a spec session at Gaydon where they sat down with the design team to create their perfect spec. And I have to say, for me, David has absolutely nailed the spec of this car. The colour, first of all, royal indigo. He has a real thing for purple cars, as do I, and this car just looks magnificent. I cannot wait to get it out into the sunshine. Now, the basic footprint or shape of the car is Vantage. However, it's got a 40mm wider track, so it's a wider car both front and rear. And then there's these louvres and openings and aero all over the car. Particularly special things about this car, they all came with carbon ceramic brakes. Now that produces something like a 23 kilo weight saving, particularly important for unsprung mass. And this car is one of the few cars to be spec'd with the lightweight wheel option, which saves another 28 kilos. But just to put that into perspective, this car still weighs around 200 kilos more than the Vantage F1 edition, which for many is the kind of halo Vantage car. But really lovely wheels, really lovely spec. The calipers on this are very, very special. If you look carefully, you'll see a Union flag design on the calipers in the same body color. These openings here from the front wheel arch, I just think look magnificent. There's carbon blade work, this trim just here, absolutely spectacular. And then you run down the side of the car and it's just got the big wide hips you expect from a car like this, and the aggressive look. Carbon fiber, it's dripping in it. Carbon fiber door mirror caps, carbon fiber bonnet, carbon fiber roof, and carbon fiber wing at the back. Now, first thing to say is, unlike the last time I was at Five Zeros, it's actually open to the public today. The American diner is full of people enjoying their food. You might be able to hear the clink of plates and cutlery in the background. And there are customers looking around all of the cars. That is the coolest thing about Five Zeros. So if you haven't come here to see the cars, then I'll put the details below. You must head over. Next question though, to wing or not to wing? That is the question. I have always been a bit of a fan of wings on the back of cars, and the wing on the back of this Vantage V12 is a standout piece. To some, I think it's probably a bit droopy. It's quite an unusual shape, but it does have a function. At 200 miles an hour, this will produce 200 kilograms of downforce. That's quite fast and not a huge amount of downforce, so it's more of an aesthetic thing as a road car, but you can de-spec this if you don't want the wing, if you just want the cleaner lines. But quite telling, I don't think they need to do any other work to the car other than just take the wing off. But when the wing comes out of the factory, the central part here is in gloss black, and then just the edges are exposed carbon fiber. And David, when he was speccing it, thought, I'm not so sure about that. I'm also not so sure the front bonnet just being completely gloss carbon, the roof. I want something just to tie it together, something just to make it a little bit more interesting. So he talked to Aston Martin Q, who are Aston Martin's customization wing, basically. Wing, no pun intended. And what he did was, this central portion is now painted in royal indigo to match the paintwork. But then you come down the car, and in the central part of the roof, you've got this body colored stripe, and then the power bulge at the front is painted in body color as well. And that just ties the car together so well. However, things like that come at a price. I remember not that long ago when Vantage was the entry level to Aston Martin, and you could pick one up for maybe 60 to 80,000 pounds. These start at 225,000 pounds before options. And this car is, as they say in the trade, fully loaded. I've mentioned the paintwork that had been done by Aston Martin Q. That was something like £20,000. But this car, as spec'd, was £359,000. Yep, fully loaded. But I think you'll agree, I mean, it's all right. If I had to take it home, I would. But let's jump inside and have a look at the interior. Whoa. I thought I would feel myself getting into the car, because once you're inside this car, the standout feature are these seats. Lightweight carbon fiber backed seats, padded with beautiful Napa leather and Alcantara. They look amazing. They're a little bit tricky to get into. The side bolster has got a carbon sill, so it's got a firm edge to it. But once you're sat in the seat, they just envelop you and they feel so comfortable. I've only sat in the car for 5 minutes, so I can't tell you firsthand what it would be like to sit in this car for hours and hours and crunch continents. But I think, honestly, they just feel very comfortable, especially for a lightweight carbon seat. Sometimes seats like this look amazing, but when you sit in them, they are less than comfortable. I think Aston Martin have pulled off a very clever trick here. Steering wheel wise, you've got that very famous kind of square shaped steering wheel with satin carbon, beautiful Alcantara, and the way that it brings your hands closer into the fixed paddles on the back of the steering wheel. Central console, and I've never been a big fan of the air vents in the Vantage or the DBS Superleggera, to be honest. But so many times nowadays we sit in cars and moan of the fact there's no physical buttons and it's all touchscreen. You won't be hearing that from me in this car. There are loads of buttons, arguably maybe too many. This looks a little bit busy and a bit dated now. You've got the kind of V12 badge just there, but it kind of fulfills a function, and I'm not so sure that bit's that important. It's the engine, it's the driving experience, it's the driving dynamics that will make this car. The interior may well feel a little bit dated now, but honestly, it's a beautiful, beautiful place to sit. There's a pretty decent amount of room in the boot. You've got a little parcel shelf behind as well. This is a Grand Tourer. You can put loads of stuff in here and do nice, big, long journeys. Sadly, the journey we've got today isn't so long, but we have got the opportunity to go and drive this car. So let's head out onto the damp roads and, you know, what can possibly go wrong? You know, V12, twin turbo, bucket loads of torque, bucket loads of horsepower. Should be fun, right? Well, this weather was not the plan. When I arrived this morning, it was bright sunshine, it was beautiful weather, we were going to take a car out and do tracking shots, and it's now very cold and incredibly wet. So I'm going to take us out for a drive because I got the opportunity to do that, but also I just need to tread very, very carefully because these are not the best conditions for driving. Now I'm in the manual gear change using the paddles, but you can run this in a standard auto box. But I think for me to get that level of engagement with the car, I just want to run it in manual change. I'm also just letting the car warm up a little bit. Red line is up at 7,000 RPM. I've then got two very important buttons on the top of the steering wheel. I've got a damper button, and I've basically got a normal, sport and track, and I'm going to leave it in the normal setting because the track option is incredibly firm. Even the sport setting is a bit too firm for UK roads. And then I've got the button on the right hand side is for your sport modes. Again, I've got sport, sport plus and track. I'm going to leave it in sport today, again just for safety more than anything. This is an incredibly valuable car and I just want to be as careful as I can. Straight off the bat, if you're just driving quietly, this is not a particularly noisy car. We've heard it at startup and it sounded all right, but if you're comparing it to a GT12, which was the premise at the beginning of this film, then there's not a comparison at all. A GT12 at startup is like basically opening the gates of hell and just having thunder fly out at you in your face. This is a little bit more genteel. Driving it through a village, I don't feel like I'm going to upset any grannies. It actually feels relatively civilized. It feels very Vantage in here. I am quite aware of the wider track. I'm also quite aware of the incredibly expensive lightweight wheels. So whenever somebody like that doesn't really give me a huge amount of space, that isn't great, to be honest. These seats feel so comfortable. I love the big mirrors with the carbon trim on them, but they just, the way they sit out from the doors, you get this incredible view out the back. You just see the edge of that droopy spoiler at the back, which looks mega. You see the big wide hips of the car sitting out of the back. and that's just pure theatre. I remember driving down this very road in the GT12 and looking out the mirror and just thinking, that's going to be hard to beat. Well, as a view, that view's pretty special. Now, compared with the standard Vantage, they've stiffened up the spring rates, 50% stiffer on the front, and I'm presuming that's to take account for a heavier engine, and 40% stiffer at the back. That's me being very, very careful in third. And I've got, the difference now is I've got twin turbos, so I'm going to have turbo spooling up, and I've got a lot more torque and a lot more power. And I've absolutely no doubt that this car is going to throw me at the horizon at a quite remarkable rate. Engine tone wise, let me just put it up into Sport Plus, and maybe that'll give me a little bit more. It sounds amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's still nowhere near as catatonic as the GT12 or even a standard Vantage V12S. Those things just had this rasp, this metallic kind of underbody of sound to it that just made them very, very special. This is a bit more muted, a little bit more muffled, maybe a little bit more like a DBS Superleggera, which, let's face it, has the same lump in it. The ride quality, amazing, really. It is a stiffly sprung car, and one of the things that when you really push this car on is its roll. It's got stiffened anti-roll bars, so Vantages don't roll a huge amount anyway when you tip them into corners, but this thing just has a nice steering feel to it, but it just doesn't seem to do any rolling. But that doesn't really transcend into a bumpy or jittery ride. It is a firm ride, don't get me wrong, and this is in the softer suspension setting. This 8-speed ZF gearbox is pretty quick and responsive on the way up or on the way down, and it's certainly improvement to the auto that was in the GT12 and the older Aston Martin sport shift gearboxes, which were, well, they were an acquired taste, and it wasn't my taste at all. I wasn't a big fan. This is pretty snappy on the way up and pretty snappy on the way down. Okay. That is maybe a third throttle. Oh man, this is a very, very fast car. There is no denying that this car isn't a very quick car. That gearbox, the shift on the way up, is just delicious. Now, it's got carbon ceramic brakes, and sometimes carbon ceramic brakes on a road car under normal driving conditions are quite dead to that first feel when you first apply them. This actually has quite a nice feel initially, and I haven't had to use them in anger yet, but I've absolutely no doubt that they will stop me, and stop me quickly. But they do have a nice feel. The carbon ceramics coupled with the lighter wheels reduce unsprung mass and should just give a slightly better steering feel. The way that the steering rack and the electronic steering is weighted is actually quite nice. It's got a firmness to it that just gives you need to be reasonably purposeful when you turn the car in, but when you do, it happens straight away. There's a connection between you and the front end of the car, and I like that very, very much. This car for me though is definitely a kind of road car, but it needs the difference between this kind of road, which unfortunately now is quite busy with Friday afternoon rush hour traffic, and a poor road surface. This is like the entry-level road you want to be driving this car on, Really what you want is an Alpine pass in France or Pyrenean pass in Spain, where you've got big wide roads and lots of long straights. David's taking this car on an epic 3.5-week European road trip this summer, and he's going to be doing thousands of miles in it, and I'm just sat here envious of the route he's just taught me through this morning. And that's what this car is made for. I feel like you could really sit in it. It is a GT car, not really a sharp and nimble sports car. And I don't think necessarily it would be the kind of car you would take on a track either. The busiest job in the UK for any entity I can think of is for the traction control systems on a V12 Vantage. Because you pull away like that in first, I've got everything on. There's no way I'm going to drive around today with anything off, because it's not my car, and it's just got so much power, and almost arguably too much. One of the nice things about V8 Vantage, and actually I was very lucky, I've driven a GT8 and a GT12, and I often say one of my favourite cars I've ever driven is an Aston Martin GT8, and the reasons for that: one, it sounds incredible, not quite as nice as the GT12, but they're not that fast. They're like 400 horsepower. It's so old school and agricultural, big clunky manual gearbox. But it's the fact that they're not that powerful and not that fast is the thing that endears them to me, because you can really tap into it and really go after the car. I don't feel like I can do that in this car. I feel like I've always got to just pare it back, just be balanced in my approach, be gentle on the inputs to the car. It's just got so much power. It's so quick, this car. If I just, there we go, it's just fighting me. And in a way, it's like sitting on a tiger and sticking a firework up its bum and holding on tight. You're basically just gonna hold on and just run down the road and constantly feel like you're fighting the car if you abuse it, if you drive it hard. If you just pare it back a little bit, if you just take a breath, if you just approach it in a more relaxed manner and just drive it with gentle inputs, you'll go through the countryside at pace. You'll feel like $1 million sat in this interior. These seats are so comfortable. You'll look out the mirrors and look at that incredible wing drooped over the back of the car, almost like it's melting in the hot day sun. And you'll just have an amazing drive and enjoy every minute of it. I think that, for me, that's the beauty of this car. You buy this car for the fact it's a V12. You buy this car because it looks stunning. The interior is beautiful. But it's not the sharpest and most dynamic and most engaging sports car. But by goodness me, is it good fun. And what a GT car, what a continent muncher. Whoa, there we go. It will bite you, it will bite you. I just squeezed on the throttle coming out of that roundabout in second, and it just snapped. I'm being super careful now. Anyway, guys, what do you think of this car? Let me know what you think to the spec. I personally think this is just a banging spec. David's also got a beautiful Viola Hong Kong, which is a Ferrari purple F8 Tributo, and we were actually going to film with that today, but I've got lots and lots of very sexy Ferrari content coming to the channel over the next few weeks, so I thought I'd mix it up a little bit, not review or film with an electric car, film with a V12. These are a dying breed. We're not going to see cars like this for much longer. A V12, they should be celebrated. Anybody who puts a V12 twin turbo car in a car of this size should be celebrated, and this car, well, amazing. What do you think? I love it. I really do. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And as I make my way back to Five Zeros. Remember, if you're in the area or you want to come and have a look at the cars, get up close and personal with them, they've got some beautiful things in there at the moment. I had me ham, egg and chips in the American diner. Very nice it was too. I'll put the details below, head on over. But for now, I'll love you and leave you. If you enjoyed that, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.